Order from our recess, we're now back in session. Welcome to my left here to the two members we didn't see last week.
She's looking. That's not.
So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is an opportunity for additions, deletions, or adjustments to the agenda. Do appreciate Amy and fixing a couple little details that I think came back out for everyone during the week. So at least what I see looks okay at this moment. And are there any other additions or corrections to the agenda?
Hearing none, I move we approve the agenda.
If we have a second, to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
And we have a second. So at that point, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, is adopted. This is an opportunity for community members. I see it, to speak if possible.
We couldn't stay away.
And she has a history, so I would certainly invite you to speak if you'd like to say.
No, this is an impressive, high quality, committee here. I'm very excited for you guys. So, nope, I'm here for the next meeting. So.
Thanks. And, I didn't ask you. Always good to check. So at this moment, then we're moving into kind of the meat of the story here, the budget overview. And again, I want to start by appreciating the thanks for, first of all the questions that came in, but then also what I consider the remarkable turnaround time by Sherry and Kurt or whoever else was involved in all of that. But Sherry, that was a really turnaround. And as reading your questions and answers, I see a couple of things I hesitated to bring a couple of questions together. But anyway, it was.
It's easier to answer.
Yeah.
Above.
So I'll turn it to you now to kind of give a brief overview, and then we'll dive in for our discussions, questions.
Yeah, I want to get you guys for the questions. There were a bunch of them. And you have a few things that I needed to fix. And speaking of that, I will tell you what the changes that are in the package that was on your desk. Those are only the pages to the budget that have changes. Yeah. And not, I mean, the whole thing. The first page, page 10, the state fund revenue, let me get my book out so I can remember. The chart changed because when we decided to decrease our EV, then we got to change the chart. And then there were some verbiage changes in the budget assumption revenue. Page. Oh, I think this is a good time to point this out too. That verbiage in that budget assumptions revenue, basically, there was a change to the budget that changed everything. We did not originally, I did not originally account for the sale of this property if it happens in the budget. In order for us to spend it, it has to be budgeted. We don't know if they'll spend it or not, but we wanted to get that in the budget. So there was an increase to the budget of $2.5 million. Which is kind of throughout the whole thing. I'll lose my voice, I'm sorry.
What happened to the sales for Greenland?
Well, she didn't only spend 2.5. Yeah. We're gonna have to save some.
Oh, that was supposed to be humor.
What, you good one?
Yeah.
Page 11, there was a correction made, some of the questions I had that were wrong in the beginning of the ballot. In the beginning of the ballot, we had that number incorrect, so it's been corrected now. And page 12, that chart has been updated to, the top for the sale to property and the total budget. Page 20 is all those numbers are, reflect the sale of this property. Page 22. I had an error on where I reported property taxes, the local, officer and the correct errors that I had just corrected. Page 28, it was brought to my attention, we didn't budget anything in tutoring. And we had, I just included it in extracurricular additional salary, so I made a change. I took $4,000 out of additional salary on page 28 in extracurricular. And I added it to tutoring on page 29. Just give us all the budget in there so we can spend that money. And then page 86 and 88, which I think are the last pages.
87.
87 and 88, are the changes to the capital projects fund where the money would land.
May I ask a question about the sale of property? I imagine there'd be some moving costs that would be incurred if this property were to sell. Was that also included?
That's why we needed to include this, because it would come out of that capital fund to,
Wow.
that part of that would be incurred in the
Capital.
expense of, maybe we have some, money we talked about in still a London mill account just for capital improvements, so we talked about that as well, as far as we're working on a redesign of the Coalfield Center to meet the needs in anticipation of the sale of this and moving. So
We just used to moving being more operating expense on it. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. Hopefully. Will be expensive. I know this is. It'll be expensive.
and I think the moving piece will probably do most of the work ourselves, like we did in elementary school. I was thinking more along the lines of funds to repurpose the facility. Yeah.
So, real quick question, is there a reason in the future, maybe when we have changes, at least for our benefit, that we have like a red line version? So we can see actually what you're talking about when we're looking at the page, because I'm looking, I go, I have no idea.
Sure.
That'd be really helpful.
Well, I say sure, Amy. My
Thank you.
spreadsheet, document.
Guru?
Okay.
Amy, make sure that's in the minutes.
What she said.
Are there any other questions?
Well, at this point, then, this when we turn to collecting all of this, I believe it was 7 different people, which there's a question that they were back into my calendar. So as you looked at the question and answer sheet that went through, then my comments here are.
I do, and, just three, one's pretty quick and easy, I think, but even before that. Reading through the red line response to our black questions was just awesome, thank you, I mean, it explains so much, I think I learned more from the Q&A than I did in spending the time on my own, so thank you. One quick one is, you mentioned, I think Kurt, you mentioned this verbally last time, and then in the verbiage here, You mentioned that a good target for any fund is typically for a certain oxide, maybe 8 to 11%. I know that the numerator would be 1.84, right? What is the denominator? Would it be is it the total general fund? So,
Yeah, it would be a percentage of the total general funds.
okay, so we're at like just below 8 in this case.
We're very close. To get where we need, where we should be.
Yeah, but in the right. I was curious also, and I read what you wrote. I think this was a question that I was a little confused, just looking at the ending, the beginning fund, each of the various years. And I do know that, you know, going back to 22, 23, rolling over into 23, 24, they match from 23, 24 is into the beginning budget. And so we wouldn't expect it would match. But then from ending budget in 24, 25 is 1.8, but then starting in the current proposed budget for 25, 26 is 4 million. So that leaves, if you sort of say what we were budgeting last year to what we're going to be starting with this year, it would feel like the delta beyond the planned contingency is about another 2 million. So did we have 2 million in extra revenue or non-spent
The
or
beginning
unallocated?
fund balance includes the contingency and the reserve at 1.8.
Right,
And then it comes out. So,
but even beyond that was like another 2 million. And I'm just
so
wondering,
last year, I can just see the visual here.
What page are you looking at, just so I can,
page 19, and there's a summary on page 19, but it's,
thanks.
So you're kind of off into this in there.
well, I'm just, you know, again, you end that year and then you start this year, and I know you expected the number to be exactly the same number, but coming out of 23 and into 23 for the next year is 3.58 and 3.6, you know, that's a match. You ended 23, 24 at 3.8. Or you thought you were going, you know, you did actually, and then, but when you did the budget, you thought you'd end with only 3. But
Yeah.
it just still seems like there's and so I'm wondering, for the forecast for this year, are we thinking that we're gonna have a lot of unspent money at the end of the year that we didn't budget? And I'm just curious if that was excess revenue or underspending. Because it seems like, if I'm following the math, it seems like it needed to be one of the other.
You're right. I need to look at this.
Okay, that's fine, and I don't mean to,
But, and I will say, because we anticipated a budget shortfall, we didn't freeze spending, so that would freeze down essential spending, at the end of the year, so that would impact that here, but you're right, they should match.
more or less.
Well, I think what's happened is, I think that additional money has been spread out into the other functions there. And other objects, and it's actually been assigned to line items to be spent, with only the contingency. But then again, I see the proposed $4 million there, so. Yeah, I'll look at
There,
it, I'll look at it.
Thanks.
I know we have the fund balance, not anything in contingency that will be closer to what look at this.
And I apologize for
No,
not
that's
getting
okay.
back to you sooner than just now.
I did not understand the question that was asked, so I appreciate it, and I will.
No problem. And just one other quick one, and I think this is more for you, Bert, because I've read, Sherry, your response about transfers in, transfers out. It's basically not a budget issue, you know, you know, the number of students we serve, we can forecast, but I'm curious more from a student census standpoint. Do we have a sense of what the net in and out transfers are in terms of kids that live in this district that are transferring out, or kids that live in Redmond or Bedford
We're
transferring?
net positive. We have been typically, and it varies. In COVID, we got a lot more homeschool kids that lived here, so we try to track all. I would say, and Amy has really been, on trying to really narrow that number down, because each year we get a list from the ESD.
Yeah.
And we find out that half of them might actually be enrolled here, they're not actually homeschool kids, so we went from COVID going from like 65 homeschool kids to 130. Then we went less than that. The ins and outs, I believe the last count was, we had about 30 kids going out and about 75 coming in. That I haven't actually looked at it in a bit, so that could be different now, but our net positive is usually anywhere from 40 to 60 kids per year, depending on what that is, and usually our outs, well, there's a variety of reasons. Like, we just had a bunch of folks want to go to an online program for convenience for their family. We have people who work in Bend who want to take their kids and have them at the school right next to their place. But then we get a lot of folks who, the other way, work here, or quite honestly, just, I think at one point we had 33 kids in our middle school from Redmond. So we get a large group coming in because of the proximity of where they are and the boundaries are,
Yeah.
and our smaller district.
Does that include like Baker or other online academies?
We haven't broken out, yeah.
Yeah, so it does, so it's net 45 positive, even including that.
I believe so, yeah, yeah, from the last time I looked at it. Now, we're always trying to recapture those kiddos and talking with them. We actually had heard recently that actually Scappoose School District, which has their own online charter, which we lost a couple kids to. Also has a partnership with Quaker, where they actually split, they do 50-50 enrollment. So people are getting really tricky with that piece, which I'm a little skeptical on how that's working for them and what that looks like. So we're looking into all those things. It's well, not to get on a soapbox a little bit, but I will, because the door is open a little bit, it's a really interesting thing, both just on the public ed support bandwagon. Unfortunately, the deck's stacked a little bit against public ed, because charter schools and private schools, we provide special education support for both. There's kids with that because of the federal mandate, so we have to support those kids. They get to make that choice, but then we're spending money to support them. And also additionally, they can come back and not be a student in our district and have the opportunity to be performing all of our activities, all our stuff. And we're not getting money for them. And the state mandate for pay doesn't match what the cost is per participant. So we're subsidizing both special education and activities for non-district kids. So, yeah, so we're looking at it all the time.
Good, I mean, I can't help but sort of note that if it is something like 40+ kids at a ADMW rate of like 11, almost 12,000, that's, you know, $1.5 million. So
Helps us, yeah.
it's a help, and the other 35 that are gone is another $500,000 that we could get back.
Exactly, well, that's why we're always asking, right? We always ask the question is, some folks make choices for personal reasons that we can't impact, right? Others, we ask, why did you leave? Was there something we could have done better? What's happening? So we try to do exit interviews with any family that we get a notification that they're going, right? For whatever reason, just because of that. I will say that we also run buses to Redmond and Tumalo, and our partnering districts or our neighboring districts aren't really happy with that, but we do it because of the net positive.
Yeah, good. Well, I can understand why it's not a line item in the budget, but I'm glad it's something that should have high visibility. That's right. Thanks. Thank you.
This is a follow-up question to the one question ago you asked, ending fund to getting fund. If there's any change, or will that affect the first motion tonight?
I don't think it's gonna affect the total budget. What I think is just. Prior year, I think we just budget everything except for the contingency into line items. Those don't always get spent, but they're budgeted that way. We have some reserve accounts in that we may not spend those funds. I don't want to guarantee that's what it is, but I can pretty much say with like 100%.
Yeah.
Assurance, it's not gonna affect the bottom.
Total scrap here would be fine.
It's just line
It's
items.
just internal adjustments.
should have asked everything, we got this back, but sorry.
Sure. Okay, other questions here, follow-ups from all of the stuff we saw?
Kurt, does that mean when you mentioned kids from out of district, we subsidize, do they not have to pay to play in? Or
They do, but it doesn't, there's a legislated amount that doesn't match the actual amount we
Right.
pay.
So they get the subsidized rate?
And actually, the law is their charter school who gets their full ADW actually pays it.
Ah.
Right, so, and it's 5% of the fee, it's about $550. Or 5% of their ADMW is where it's capped. So,
Is that net positive 48, including kids that come from Black Butte schools, since that only goes to 8th, and then also Tumalo? Middle?
I think it's all, right, all of our net
Anyone that
positive.
lives outside of the
Yeah.
sister school
So
district
it's
is
Tumalo.
counted.
Yeah, and we used to have a different relationship with Black Butte School District, and so now we made it the same where it's an inter-district transfer period, so we can track them. It's not, it used to be a contract for service and they would bill us. And that's not, so now we can track them.
Until high school, like, since they don't have a high school.
Yeah.
they're ours.
Yeah.
They're in district.
I do have a follow on real quick about that. And this may be projecting too far into next year's, which is, you know, with Heart of Oregon, the changes for Heart of Oregon, that are sort of on the table.
Yeah,
That's not a question for this year. That would really then be a question for
Yeah.
next year in terms of
exactly.
how that impacts us.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now I will. hold that back.
But I'll answer it now just because, so Heart of Oregon, were any non-resident kid, so any non-sisters kid, we have relationships with every school district, so we get a cut for, we do the accreditation of the content. So we guarantee the language arts credits, the math credits, whatever, we have that interaction with them, it comes through a sister school district credit.
Right.
So for that, we get a 10%. The home district, wherever kid came from, like Ben Lapine, gets a 10% cut of their ADMW, and then 80% goes to Heart of Oregon for their program.
Okay.
So that's the relationship there. And if there are kids that go there, we get 100%. That's part of our agreement for their use of Cloverdale. That will change.
Right. Okay,
So,
something to keep, you know, thanks.
Okay, other questions?
I had a question, probably a better question from the last meeting, but I'll ask it now.
yeah.
So what we didn't talk about is the process in which schools are involved in developing this budget. So I'd be interested in knowing what that is. As a longtime high school principal, I see the budget and I look at it at a granular level that's not 30,000 feet, but more and more like a day-to-day kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how principals and teachers have access, or not access, but input into what this looks like.
Yeah, we don't have, Sherry does not have individual meetings with the teachers there, but we send it out to principals, here's what it is, reach out to staff, what is your budget for this? Now, sometimes we have to put constraints on it, because we don't have an open fund source, right? So we will maneuver within, but for example, I think it was under Sherry, we had a different allotment per kid in each building, and we did in different dollars amounts. And so we set it based on enrollment, a set number that you got per kid to equate to your budget, working with them about what their needs were. And some of them have split that out even internally. I know when Joe was at the high school, he took some money and did some internal professional development and had some funds available for that based on the district allotment. So we have a formula of allotment, and then we give the schools kind of their independence to work to move that around how they need it.
And that is so.
It's just their general allotment. Yeah, and again, we did it based on their
We
enrollment.
take, because payroll is such a huge part of the budget, percentage of the budget, and the principals talk with Kurt, they know their payroll needs, we adjust for those things. You know, we add FTE if needed, or. So between the payroll and our other non-discretionary expenditures, utilities, those. Solid things, we make sure those are all budgeted first, whatever left over, we allocate on a per student basis to the schools, and they can choose how they want to budget.
I guess I asked that question because I
get the feeling that finances down the next year or so could be a little iffy, right? So that's at a point in time when a principal like would start thinking about, how do I protect my instructional coaches? How do I protect my counseling staff? How do I, and am I gonna have input into those? So those are some of the, when I ask these questions, they may seem bizarre, but it's because I'm looking at it from that perspective. So I know, for example, that my operating budget at 4 different high schools, 40 to 50% of it was athletics.
Yeah.
And that went to 15% of my kids. So how am I gonna have to go in and touch that money to, or I have to think about transportation, or I mean, you have to think about something else, because I gotta start building walls to be able to protect what I would refer to as keeping the main thing.
So staffing is the priority.
Yeah.
Right, we work with our folks, like this year we had to reduce 4, we absorbed 2, and we had to RIF 2.
Yeah.
And it's looking at, we very much look at the ratios, programs, where are we under, over, where can we absorb, where can things, you know, we've been very fortunate, both with our local option and with our growth, that we've been able to have a really unbelievable ratio. Right, I mean, I think our elementary was at 1 to 21. Our middle school was a bit of an anomaly because last year we had the 8th grade class at 120 kids, so it was at 1 to 25. They didn't want by 2 kids per with the staffing ratio because just we had a big class, right? Which is lower this year, and then the high school B was 1 to 18. And again, because we were trying to offer a breadth of programming, which is a part of our the local option mandate, not mandate, but kind of our mantra. And so we very much looked at those issues when we took into account how are we doing it, what programs can we have impacts to service the kids and reduce. But as you know, staffing is right, that's 85% of our budget is people, right? And so it's hard to have a big impact without looking at that. And we did go through, we cut district level professional development, we cut some of the other, I don't think we cut curriculum, we did cut some tech, right? We were trying to be mindful, have the least impact on folks. And again, projecting ahead, I agree, the next 3 years are gonna be really challenging, right? And that's, we're trying to set ourselves up for more of a steady line, not a wave, right? And we'll see. Part of that reality is if we're, you know, I think I said this in the opening remarks, if we're down another 20 kids next year, that's gonna be hard to absorb. You know, I think love to meeting with the city about the UGB and some of the, what's happening with that moving forward. We would anticipate there's a couple developments that should hopefully be breaking ground. And so I think that'll offset, because the building that's happened this year is not what I would describe as family friendly building, right? So I think we're gonna get back to that, or we're gonna see a different trend where we are I thought we were costing ourselves out of families 5 years ago, but our growth continued, quite honestly. So we'll see what the data tells us as we keep moving forward.
And of course, in my schools, I might have 6-figure Title I money.
Yeah, and all of we do, and all of ours is spent at the elementary school, because that's where our title service is focused. So again, that's all decided by the principal and that staff looking how they made a choice. Again, great example. They wanted behavior support, and so we stopped doing title pullout, which is not, I mean, it should be pushing anyway, and looked at behavior support so kids could be ready to access their learning with social emotional support. And so that's been the focus the last couple of years based on the feedback from staff. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I have sort of a general follow-up question, and that is impacts, are there any updates about what the governor's proposed budget or what might actually get allocated to the state?
Yeah.
Are there any recent updates, recently in the last week or two from the federal level? So those huge funding sources. Are there is there any new information that's coming in?
Not this year. Right now, the only thing that's paying, we budgeted for there was a slight potential that had really good traction, so we already budgeted for the relief in PERS. There was a 170 million that was earmarked that actually the governor signed yesterday. We had already reflected that in our PERS rates in this budget. The only thing that we're looking at right now that could come through, which I actually don't know, it's lukewarm at this point because of the federal instability or perceived federal instability, is whether we get more support locally in the state for special education. They talked about raising the cap from 11 to maybe 13% and looking at high cost disability, full funding, high cost disability. So that depending on, we're at 13.5, so it depends on where they increase it to, how much it'll impact us, right? And where we'll move those funds. So we would move some of those staff into that fund source and that would free up general fund money. But not gonna be a massive impact to our budget at this point. But that's the only relief point that is there. And honestly, that's why I felt a little bit okay with our 1170, which I think is maybe optimistic. We might stay at 1150. And if we get that, then if we don't see the kids, then we'll know we'll just have to hold tight and not spend the money.
The second half, of that question's on the expenditure side, I think they're going into bargaining with. When do you anticipate that to finish or any idea?
Good question. We haven't had meeting one yet. I mean, we've got demands to bargain, but no, we haven't met with either group yet. Which Joe and I were just talking about, which either a bad sign or a good sign. We're not sure. You know, we've done pretty extensive work in both contracts in the last couple of bargaining sessions. So we're hoping that means there's not gonna be a lot of language issues and maybe it's gonna just come down to COLA and cap. I know that I think every other district around us is already engaged and had meetings. And so we're waiting. It is the associations, right? They've given us the demand to bargain notice, but they have not set a date and reached out that way. So we're waiting on bated breath to get that process going and see where it ends up, which could be another impact potentially. We think I mean, you always budget for you think what's fair. Sometimes you're above it, sometimes you're below it. So there could be some small impacts on the budget, but we think we've accounted for that as well.
Just as an editorial comment, as usual, we will have to start school and not know what our revenue is or what our.
Yep.
So that's just the nature of the.
Yes, it was a little bit of my lament today at the superintendent's coffee about just the budget process in the state is. We'll approve a budget before we know our final dollar figure allotment. So, which is, yeah, so.
You'd have a neighboring district bargain sort of leader.
Yeah.
And that could be a good thing for you, that could be a really bad thing for you.
Exactly, depending on what they said, exactly, yes.
So you want to be first.
Yeah.
So Eric, I want to dive into what we were chatting about just before.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you a question in the whole group here. Probably worthwhile.
Right,
Here's the
so,
right answer. But
yeah.
What I said.
yeah, so, while reading through the materials, I didn't quite follow, I didn't realize that there were effectively two aspects that we were discussing today. One was both the budget, and the second being the approval of taxes and that tax rate. And so what I wanted to understand is how does that, where does that information come from? How do we arrive at these numbers and how does that affect our budget proposal?
We have a flat rate that, for our tax rate, the 0.75%.
Mhm.
Flat rate at, I guess that's the law. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was what, a local option is what the voters approved. And the debt service, allocation, we take our debt service payments that are due and allow for a, 5% non-collected amount of taxes, so we increase what we're asking the county for in taxes by 5% more than our debt service, less any fund balance that we have at the end of this year.
Okay. I think that answers my question. I just want to,
There's two after that.
Yeah.
We have a permanent tax rate.
yes, was the 0.75.
Which is 408, I believe.
Yeah, 4.09.
Okay.
And then the local option.
It's the 75 cents.
Right.
75.
Making sure that there's two parts to that.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, yeah, that actually clarifies it for me, thank you.
And that 4.09 is the state,
Has been said.
right?
Yeah.
It's statewide, right? It's the whole state.
No,
Well,
No, it's not.
each district ended up different based on
Even though it all goes to one pool and then redistributed.
when.
And it does,
Now
yeah,
that Measure 5 came into play,
Yeah.
then you had all of these districts with disparate rates and that. And it all came into a statewide funding formula, and as they did that. Then wherever your tax bases were and a variety of things, they went through all kinds of homogenization. And each district ended up with a different permanent rate, so.
But it's still issued by the state, that number.
yes, it's drawn in, so our taxes, and jump in, Sherry, but it goes, like our property taxes go into the county and they come back to us. And they won't be as much as what the state school fund contribution, but in a given year, if we get more money, then we'll get less from the state and the state school fund. Because we're gonna get the same amount based on
No
their
matter what.
formula in Measure 5. So it gets balances, it's just where the flow comes from. So we budget for the amount, it'll come from different, the pools will vary per year, but it's always gonna be the same amount based on the state school fund formula.
Yeah, and that actually ties to one of the questions I had, in the.
That was based on what the tax rates were, and the permanent tax rates of each of the districts, and that all came into play.
Well, it is interesting that as a school budget committee, we would have to approve a state issued tax rate.
I think
I think it's
that,
more for the record.
yes. Yes.
That we acknowledge it
That we
exists.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Fair
like,
enough.
I mean, honestly, not to, but it is like. All the stuff we're doing now with the consolidated grant that you guys are double approving everything, right? That there
Right.
has to be a public record of it, of the people knowing, you guys knowing, and that's not hiding the rate from anybody.
Okay. Public record, okay.
Yeah,
And this rate has been fixed for 30 years.
yeah. Been the
Or
same,
longer.
been the same for the last 10, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was,
good question.
Thank you.
about 1990s when all that.
Yeah.
World changed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I think
and
92.
now we're going 25 years into local option, so this hasn't changed in 25 years.
Right. So, right, when we did pass that, we got straight to be pretty much short, and then get it compressed and then right. So then you got the max on it.
And just for your information, Pitcher School District had in Deschutes County, the lowest tax rates of any of the other school districts. So
I'm sorry, I missed that, what was that?
we have the
Lowest?
lowest tax rates.
We have the lowest combined tax rate.
Of any of them.
Combined with the local option,
Local option bonds,
all of it combined.
Across the state?
No, in
County.
Deschutes County,
Okay,
We have a very good tax rate.
yeah,
that's interesting.
but, well. Ben didn't approve their local option, right?
Man, no.
yeah, they didn't,
So
but
does that
their
still-
facility bonds, the cost per thousand, which is currently on the books, we're still below
Oh, with, okay,
everybody. Yeah, even with our
okay, I see.
$2 for the elementary school and the 42 from the maintenance bond and these rates.
Hmm.
We're gonna have to write all this down for the next.
But isn't it also
Okay.
true that rates of what we pay in and what we get back? I haven't seen the numbers in the last few years, but the amount of, the amount in and out of the state, the ratio that we get back for
Yeah.
what we do pay in.
Right.
Oh, yeah, because
And that's
our
one of the-
property values are high,
Right.
we're subsidizing a lot of places, yes, that's what Measure 5.
And
Yeah.
so we pay less, but because of the ratio that
Yeah.
for kids.
Yes.
We actually get, we still are overpaying. for the high-
Yes.
Smaller percentage, but
Yes.
high dollar amount.
Yes,
Well,
Yeah.
what-
and 4% of also massive property values from the compression rate is a bigger number compared to our property.
So the other piece that is very historical that you might be interested in. But the sister school district prior to Measure 5, prior to Blackview Ranch. So we're talking about 50s at that time period. We had the lowest funding, the amount of funding per student of any school district in the state. In other words, I have the least amount of tax value to tax in order to fund the students before I was all of the equalization. So equalization in 1890 actually helped this district. So,
It was before the boom.
not necessarily since then,
Yeah.
but then it did.
It did.
And we're happy to contribute.
Yeah. Thank you.
Considering we have a very small percentage.
Yeah.
sure, right.
So other questions, so a lot of good general stuff that we've been talking about lately, but anything else specific to that question and answer kind of thing that you asked and maybe didn't give the full answer or anything else here that anyone has or additional?
No, the responses were great.
Yeah. And there were a lot of questions, which was really, really great.
We are then approving the time and let them know what is Russia. Before we get into the committee, I'd like to thank Sherry for putting this together. Yeah, it's very helpful.
Yeah.
As we move towards our conclusions here, we will have two separate motions needed. That are written here, on a piece of paper, but they do need to be read into the record, so whoever makes the motion, please read it exactly for the record, so that it's recorded. And then we'll do the approving the budget first, and then we'll take a second motion, then to approve the taxes at that point. So we'll get to that in a minute, just before I double check to see if there's anything else we want to discuss before we get to that point. Because once we're at that point, then essentially the budget committee's job is done with approved budget and allocated taxes. But there's going to be a hearing then on June the 4th at the school board meeting. So the school board is who has a hearing and actually adopts the budget. And it does the adoption of the actions and that. But in the past, I've come to that budget hearing just because I've been the chair a couple of years here. And just gave a quick overview of the process to be read into the record and stuff. But everyone is invited to participate or to come with any comments that you would like to make or future thoughts to share with in the hearing and that type of thing. And I'd encourage you to do that. I intend to do that. I'm a little bit iffy because I'm having a knee replacement surgery in a couple of weeks. I'm coming up on that, but I should get in here and be okay. So, but in the meantime, I would still encourage everyone who would like to participate to do that.
Steve, can I say something real quick?
Yes.
I just wanted to commend you again for another fine year of kind of spearheading the budget committee. You do a great job. You really articulate well and explain everything thoroughly and give all of us an opportunity to share and ask questions. So I just wanted to thank you for all your efforts.
Well, I appreciate that. And then I also have to give credit because everyone behind the scenes has a tremendous technical helper and all of that. So like Amy does all of that stuff for these guys, and Lola does all that stuff.
It's a team.
So
Unofficial.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I think the intensity that Sisters Budget Committee evaluates the budget is really unusual for a district of our size. Lots of districts just kind of march in the room and, yep, we like it. And it's over and done in 30 minutes. And that's true, I think, for a lot of districts our size
yeah,
and certainly smaller districts.
there's a lot of quality folks on the appointed budget committee that have different experiences and backgrounds, and at that point, we could probably use a little more gender diversity, but. So that's terrific. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Any other comments then before?
I wanna say something before the motions or before the motion, I guess, to approve the budget and that. If you'll use the sheet that was on the table tonight when you got here, not the one in the packet. It's adjusted for the.
This is the
new
adjustment,
amount, so.
right?
And I would just follow up and thank everybody for the time, effort, energy. It is great. And we know that everyone's looking at it because things are found that, I mean, you guys do an excellent job of finding those things that don't stop flying up and making sure that we're either fixing it or answering the why. So good job. Appreciate it.
Well, at this point, we're gonna move ahead, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the budget. I'll make that motion. And you need to read that right there. Actually, I'll read it, yes. I move the budget committee of the sister school district approve the budget for 25-26 fiscal year in the amount of $38,741,370. Thank you. So it's been moved that we approve the budget.
Yeah, that's just,
As read.
that's not the.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And Jeff Smith, second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Budget is approved. I'm now
Yay.
looking for a motion for approving the Exodus.
Somebody wants to approve the taxes.
No one wants to be on the record for that.
That will be in the nugget, who's approving the taxes.
Yeah, I love it, love it. I move that the sister school district budget committee approve taxes for the 2025-26 fiscal year at the rate of $4.99.0997 per $1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes, 75 cents per $1,000 in local option taxes, and in the amount of $3,544,224 for payment of bond principal and interest.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Yeah, is it second? So, do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Taxes are approved. Thanks, to Rob.
That's right. I gotta show my face in jail.
So with that, the budget committee is not only recessed, but we are adjourned for the year. And again, please attend the budget hearing on June 4th, when you make any comments.
Before you adjourn tonight.
Yes.
I'm done.
I wanted to make you guys aware that for the current year budget, 24-25 budget, we will be doing a supplemental budget. It will be presented at the June budget hearing for this budget. When the budget was done last year, we assumed the expenditures for the new elementary school would be more paid.
Paid out in the previous budget.
Would have paid more last year, so we didn't budget enough in that fund for beginning fund balance. The delay in school being finished and the billing by the contractor caused us not to make the final payments until this year. And we didn't have appropriations for enough, so we need to do a supplemental budget in the 400 funds, capital project funds, just to make sure we are compliant.
How much?
Yeah, that was my question.
2.5 million.
So what's that as a percentage of that?
Of a $42 million bond. I mean, that's how much we had in that account, roughly 41.
Right.
Yeah. So
And I presume that's totally within the board prerogative at that point, so you don't need to call it.
Yeah, I think the board will vote on that. It has to be noticed and everything, so we'll do all that proper stuff and present it to the board at the budget hearing. But I wanted you guys to know that that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other updates? Okay, the budget committee is.
Thank you.